So welcome once again to another beautiful portion of this book that is just filled with his mysteries, line upon line. It's just every time we read it, it's just I feel like I'm reading a letter written directly by our bridegroom, our Messiah himself, even though he didn't write it, obviously Matthew did. However, I just feel like the essence of his words, obviously all scriptures, right? But I guess particularly in the books like Matthew, Luke, John, you hear him more, you see him more. So having said that, we're going to begin the chapter. I did put, oh my goodness, I just realized I have chapter 17 here. Let me actually, I'm not sure. Let me bring this down because I'm not sure why I have gone to the right chapter and it changed. So sorry, guys. We are reading chapter 22 tonight, not 17. You know what it is? My computer's like extra slow and I had left it ready, but just bear with me. I have to go like through all the slides and I don't know if you see how slow it's like loading. Really extra slow. Clearly, I need a new computer, but that's in the works. Abba willing. Bear with me, those catching the replay later. I apologize for that little technicality issue. Matthew 22. Hold on. Oh my goodness. Is this one? Okay, here we go. Oh my goodness, this is so slow. Great. Okay, so like I had said at the beginning, I included all 46 verses in this study. However, are we going to cover all of it? Abba willing. There is a lot that is repeated, honestly, that there's no need to take extra long with it. So I'm gonna try my best to do cover the entire chapter just because it just connects beautifully together, line upon line. As a matter of fact, this chapter is a continuation of chapter 21, which Yasmin taught the last 2 weeks. So we're gonna see that. So now that I have the right chapter on the screen, we're gonna go ahead and read. Oops. Wait, I'm trying to. I'm sorry, guys. I feel like this is gonna be like taking longer just because my computer is acting up. All right. So now we are on Matthew 22. And unless anyone who's connected wants to read, let me know, like out loud. If not, I should have asked before. Yeah, Nina, sorry, I just saw your text. Yeah, that was my computer just being extra slow. I have put it, but I guess because I went on the Zoom immediately, it didn't like finish loading. So it stayed behind. It's all good. We are on chapter 22 indeed tonight. Really close to finishing Matthew, by the way. It's been a slow journey, but I do like the fact that we've taken extra slow because we've been able to truly dive in this time around in the book of Matthew. I remember the first time we did it, it was still good. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like this time around it's been amazing, honestly. All right, so if nobody wants to read, I'll read. Excuse me. So the parable of the wedding feast, and I'm going to do it by part. I'm going to read first this part, and then I'll take a break, and we'll go back to the other parts to see how much we can cover, if we can cover everything. So verse 1, and Yahshua answered and spoke to them again by parables and said, the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who arranged a marriage for his son and sent out his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding, and they were not willing to come. Again, he sent out other servants, saying, tell those who are invited, see, I have prepared my dinner, my oxen and fatted cattle are killed, and all things are ready. Come to the wedding. Verse 5. But they made light of it and went their ways, one to his own farm, another to his business. And the rest seized his servants, treated them spitefully, and killed them. But when the king heard about it, he was furious, and he sent out his armies, destroyed those murderers, and burned up their city. Then he said to his servants, the wedding is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. Therefore, go into the highways, and as many as you find, invite to the wedding. So those servants went out into the highways and gathered together all whom they found, both bad and good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came, when the king came in to see the guests, he saw a man there who did not have on a wedding garment. So he said to him, "Friend, how did you come in here without a wedding garment?" And he was speechless. Then the king said to the servants, "Bind him hand and foot, take him away and cast him into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen." And what a way to end this first portion of this book, because this is the whole context of this section right now. It's about the call and who's answering. But let's break this down precept upon precept. Before that, I do want to share, and I do have, by the way, a lot more slides on this portion than everything else. So you're going to see we're going to take a little bit longer in this first portion, but then the rest is quick. So just FYI. And again, if you guys have questions or want to participate, please, by all means. So again, this first section of Matthew 22 has to do about the invitation to what, right? It's about the parable of the wedding feast, which we find later in the book of Revelation, right? So there is no break, like I said at the beginning, between chapters 21 and 22. What Yasmin taught the last 2 weeks beautifully connects to this portion. And as a matter of fact, you see that chapter 22 begins with the word "and Yasha answered and spoke to them." So it's a continuation, meaning like the story is just one long story. It's like a bug in front of me. One long big story that, because we are in modern times, the Bible has been broken down by parts, like meaning they added the chapters and the verses, but before scriptures and the scrolls, they had no break. It was just like one long book that it was just a one story that beautifully connected with one another, right? There's no break. So I just wanted to point that out because this is literally a continuation with everything that she taught. So again, Yasha is criticizing those religious leaders before him. Again, not every leader, just the religious ones. That's always like the highlight. The issue is that these particular leaders are misleading. The people who take the leader's words are true or for true. Meaning the people whom they're leading them astray with their false doctrine, right? Their false ordinances of men, or how I like to call, or like Messiah himself calls it, traditions of men. That's what Messiah was correcting. And then he gives this parable and he says the kingdom of heaven may be compared to, right? He starts like that. So again, the wedding of a king's son adds much gravity to the event. And I added here that it was a societal obligation in those days, by the way, and those cultures, not only for the Hebrew, but every culture up until even not too long ago, it was an obligation to attend a wedding if you were invited. And that's something of nowadays that people just don't show up and it's rude, right? But back in the days, it was like you just didn't do that, right? So the parable again is linked with Proverbs 9, and I don't have it here, but I have in the precept upon precept, we're going to read some of it because it has to do with wisdom. Proverbs 9, we're going to speak about it. And again, wisdom in their culture was known as an entity, meaning a person. That's how they viewed wisdom. And because of the fact that Solomon did a very good job in the book of parables portraying wisdom as a person. And truly we know it is because Messiah is wisdom through the Father's Ruach, right? The Luke 14 account, which correlates, by the way, with Matthew 22, we're going to see that some distinctions. So that the parable was on a Shabbat and at the fair, and that this took place at a Pharisee's house on the road to Jerusalem. So I just wanted to add that there because I'm not going to go read word by word to the connecting precepts that, you know, like the other accounts of Luke or Mark that have the same story. They do add some details, but I leave that up to you guys to do your own studying. So again, the Luke parable has a similar core truth as the Matthew 22 parable, But like I said, it has major differences. And it is not to be pitted against Matthew 22, but parable for which is most accurate because they were told at different times to different audiences. And again, just as a reminder, for those of you who don't know, Luke was mainly writing to a Gentile nation or Gentile converts that were just coming in, being grafted in. Matthew's audience was for the Jew of his days. So because both were writing to two completely different audiences, that's why in the two books we do see some differences. Not differences, but details. It's actually the same story. I shouldn't say difference. It's no difference, but we do find like either added details or details that are on one and not on the other, right? So that's what I meant by that. Any moment now you can switch. There you go. So again, and we're gonna read it when I have also the connecting line by line, but Revelation 19:9, blessed are those who are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. So again, the banquet is prepared, servants are sent out to summon the guests to come. The guests refuse to come in a nutshell. That's what Messiah is saying in this parable, right? Which is super rude, by the way. Like you just don't refuse to come when people invite you to a wedding, right? So we see that various excuses are made. Some of the guests even murder the servant messengers, which we know what that literally means. Not only did they murder Messiah, which was the messenger, but they also murdered the prophets that came before him, including John the Baptist, bringing this message of truth, the gospel of truth, right? So followers of the Most High and his Son are obligated to obey, worship, and glorify him and gather together to do it. So our gathering together in worship acknowledges God as our priority. And that is the whole point of this parable, that he's trying to portray that not only just the invitation to the wedding, but what people were doing with the invitation, right? So let's break this down. What is this parable about? And again, I have down here more on Revelation, including verses 7 and 8. 19, let us be glad and rejoice and give him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come. And his wife, oh my goodness, move. And his wife has made herself ready. And to her it was granted to be arrayed in fine linen, clean and bright, for the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. So again, that brings in more clarity on this parable. So number one, we have that the king, obviously, it's our Ahaya, the Most High, right? The Father. Number two, we know that the Son is our bridegroom, our Mashiach, Messiah, right? Number three, we see that the banquet is the same as in Revelation 19, which is the wedding supper of the Lamb. And number four, that the Jews are the guests that didn't come or refused to come, right? And then the Gentiles who are grafted in replace them. And we see more on this on Romans 11. I didn't include it in this study, but Romans 11 is the one basically that Paul explains how the Gentiles being grafted into Israel and basically replacing those that were of the original branch, but they refused Messiah, therefore they were cut off. So again, like Revelation 19 says, blessed are those who are called to the wedding supper of the Lamb. So it is an honor, guys, an honor to be invited to the wedding. Let us be just with the expectation and not refusing. You know, today it's funny because today I heard someone say, not today, just kidding, it was yesterday. I have my days mixed up. But anyhow, yesterday I heard a person talk to mentally ill people basically. And she was quoting some scriptures and whatnot with the group therapy that she was doing. And then part of the assignment in the group therapy was for the members to just basically say how they viewed themselves in the scriptures or how they viewed, the Most High in their lives, et cetera, et cetera. And one of them kind of like gave the context of like behind everything she was trying to say, it was like that she wanted to meet him, right? That she wanted to meet him face to face and that she wanted to meet the Son. She basically said the Son and the Father, the Holy Spirit, whatever, right? And then the lady leading the group, her answer was like, oh, I want to do that too, but just not yet. And my immediate reaction was like, what do you mean? Like, What do you mean you don't want to meet them yet? What does that mean? And I know carnally, I understand where that thought is coming from. It's coming from literally from carnality. It's coming from I'm not ready to die. Because that's where that thought comes from. Like, I'm not ready to die. Because meeting him would mean that I'm dying to this life and I'm moving on to eternity, right? That's the thought process which many have. But then again, in other words, you're kind of refusing the wedding supper. Because guess what? To be in the wedding supper, you gotta let go of this flesh and this life. It ain't gonna happen. You're not gonna carry on this life to the wedding supper of the Lamb. So I'm not saying that you should desire death because that's suicide. I'm not saying that at all, right? What I'm trying to say is that you should love him so much that the minute that you feel you're about to meet him, you are so ready to be like, let me put on the right garments. I am so ready, right? I am so ready. There's a huge difference with obviously not wanting to pass away, but y'all understand what I'm trying to say, right? It's not that complicated. But yes, a carnal mind will bind you to this life, so much so that you don't want to let it go, which is why many are called and few are chosen. So again, although some teaching allegories taken from this parable are good, it doesn't mean they are the point of the parable, which again is what I said. Many just take it as just the invitation to the wedding itself. But we see that the king sends his soldiers to take retribution on those guests who murdered his servants, right? We do see that he says to bind them hand and foot. So they forget that part of the parable. And that is the key of the parable that Messiah is actually trying to get at. So I just wanted to point that out, right? So again, the invited ones equal the wealthy and the aristocrats from their days, which were obviously the Pharisees. And then the rest of Jews, which obviously were refusing or denying Messiah or not, just denying him altogether, right? And then this time the king had his servants seek out the common and the poor, and in the parable, obviously. The servants are looking for new guests outside of the city, meaning this is in the context within the parable. And the changing of guests is not a changing of ethnicities. Again, a lot of people think, and I add that there because a lot of people see this parable as, oh, he came for the Jew, but the Jew did not receive him, therefore he went to the Gentiles. And like they see it as a change of ethnicity, meaning like it's not about being an Israelite, it's about now the Gentiles, we're Gentiles. And they identify, and that was me too when I first started in this walk. I would identify myself as a Gentile believer. But I see now how that is an oxymoron. It actually makes no sense because the Gentiles, even within the structure of the tabernacle, we see that the Gentiles are those that stay in the outer courts and they do not make it into the Holy of Holies, which we know already that the tabernacle is very symbolic of what we are to become. So if we stay at a Gentile level, that means that we never really made it into his chosen people. Remember, many are called, but few are chosen. We are not to remain Gentiles, but we are supposed to be grafted in, again, as Romans 11 states, grafted in into the cultivated olive tree, with Paul references as Israel, right? And we know that Israel has nothing to do with physical ethnicity. It has to do with a spiritual house, right? So again, there are still entrance requirements. Whether you are a blood-born Israelite or not, there's still the same entrance requirements, and you do need a wedding garment. We see that the man without the wedding garment was bound and thrown out into the darkness, which we know is Hades or hell. Let me look at the chat really quick. Cooperate. Yes, adoptive Israelites, absolutely. We are grafted in. Okay, who doesn't get it? Oh, okay, I see the messages. Yeah, some people just, I get it. Like some people see it as like, bro, you're depressed. I remember one time I made a comment like that on social media and I have a friend who was legit concerned for me. Because I said like, bro, I hate this world and everything about it. Like like I said something about, obviously like it wasn't like that dramatic, but he took it like I needed help. I was like, I know in my heart, like you have no idea. But anyhow, let's continue. He was ready to Baker act me.
I was gonna say that.
All right, so
The fire rescue.
that's the next portion. So let's see, I know, right? Let's go to the connecting precepts really quickly for this part. So we have for verse 1, and again, verse 1 is just him connecting with the other chapter, previous chapter, right? And Yasha answered and spoke to them. And who's them? Obviously, like I said, the aristocrats of those days, the Pharisees, the wealthy people, right? And then he spoke to them again in parables. And we do say, and we do know, I believe it was either Yaz or Jess that spoke about this matter, that how he spoke in parables because the truth ain't for everyone.
Yeah.
He basically continued speaking in mysteries to them because he realized like the same prophecy as Isaiah, they have eyes, but they do not see. They have ears, but they do not hear. So in other words, they're not truly following me. They're going after their own personal gains. And he was just not for that. And so because of that, he's like, I'm gonna speak in parables because those that are born again in the spirit, in the Ruach, they'll get it. They'll capture it.
Nothing new under the sun.
Nothing new under the sun. So connecting with that one verse, we have Luke 14:16, which again is the other account um uh, that speaks on the same parable. And so I'm not gonna read it. And like we had already read it, so I'm not gonna read it again. We have Revelations 19:7-9, which has to do with the weddings, with the invitation to the wedding supper of the Lamb. Again, we had spoken about it, so I'm not gonna read it. So for verse 4 specifically, where it says, again, he sent out the servants saying, tell those who are invited, see, I have prepared my dinner, my oxen and fatted cattle are killed, and all things are ready, come to the wedding. This is obviously him inviting, like just basically saying everything is set out for you. Like the table has all the filet mignon, the table, the food is ready for you. Just come, basically, right? So we have connecting with verse 4, Proverbs, and this, I actually just put verse 2, but the entire first portion of Proverbs 9 has to do with wisdom. She has slaughtered her meat, she has mixed her wine, she has also furnished her table. And this is speaking when it says she, if you read the whole chapter, that she is in regards to wisdom. So what does that tell you? That wisdom is the one, his wisdom, his Holy Spirit, right? Through Messiah is the one who is inviting us to the wedding supper of the Lamb. It's very clear. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say something that when you were reading number 4 and then you were connecting it to that precept, I don't know why. I was just thinking of the old, like what in the tabernacle when they used to sacrifice the animals.
Uh-huh.
And that just came to me like because it said my oxen and my fattened calf are killed. And weren't those animals that were sacrificed in
They
the
were
temple?
sacrificed
In the
and they
tabernacle.
were received by him as pleasing aromas.
That's
That's a
another
very good
thing.
point.
Yeah.
That is a very good point. And obviously we see that what was being killed were clean animals. So again and again, it's so crazy how people just choose not to see these things, right? Like they'll say, like, I even had a coworker telling me like, oh, because we were talking about the fact that I don't eat pork, et cetera, et cetera. And I was trying to explain why. They're all believers, by the way, but you know how it is.
Yeah.
So she was saying like, oh, but are you Muslim? And I'm like, heck no, girl. Like, no, I'm a whole Bible believer. But then she was like, oh, but you know, because that's like the Old Testament, like the New Testament. And I was just like, right, let me just keep my composure because I know we were all there once. And I tried just like, I'm like, it's okay, she's not there yet. So I just said like, yeah. I just kind of looked at her with a smile, trying not to look sarcastic, you know, because I really try to portray the fruits of the spirit in me. I'm like, you know, flesh die right now because my flesh wants to be like, come on, girl, like, let's debate. But I was just like,
Let me pull up the verse.
I kind of just gave her I just choose to see him as the God who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And I kept it at that, right? And like we didn't speak about the matter again. But I'm just saying, like, once you see it everywhere, even within the New Testament, which we're reading right now. How even in parables and examples of the wedding supper of the Lamb, you see oxen and fatted cattle. You don't see pig or shellfish or you know what I mean? Like you don't see the unclean animals, even though technically this is obviously an allegory, a metaphor. It's not literal that he's killing a calf, or who knows, maybe he is.
Maybe.
You know, maybe, I don't know. But the fact that even within the allegory, he's still using clean animals.
And
Come
it's
on,
gonna,
people,
and
connect
it's
it.
gonna be a holy day when he comes.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So let me see the chat before I continue with the connections. Okay, yeah. All right, they're just agreeing. So come on, yeah, we're in the Ruach. Okay, so connecting now with verse 7. I'm gonna skip through these. So verse 7, but when the king heard about it, he was furious, and he sent out his armies, destroyed those murderers, and burned up their city. So this is key because this is the king again. Who's the king?
Messiah.
No, it's the father. Remember, the king is the father, the son is the bridegroom, right?
Oh, that's
Yes,
right.
yes. So the king heard about it. And what did he hear? Again, the fact that they had seized his servants, which in that is also Messiah. So the king heard about it and he was furious, and he sent out his armies, which is not, we know who his armies are, is his angel, the angelic body, right? And destroyed those murderers and burned up their city. And that resonates with the book of Daniel, which is what we're gonna read. Actually, yes, Daniel. Yes, Sylvie, I see your hand.
Maybe I am off topic, but I also see the whole, the whole clean animals and all that as kind of like a metaphor too of like Messiah's work. Like he did all the works already. He's shown you, the rightful like path. And so he's kind of like inviting you to him. Am I like on the wrong path here? I'm sorry.
No, I believe it connects if you think about it, because everything, even from the animals here that we are allowed to eat in this realm, it connects with what we are to become in the spirit. Like that's why there's a core distinction between clean and unclean. And I know this is not, the topic of tonight's study, but since we brought it up, of course, let's talk about it. So I do believe, like you said, that it also, it's, if you think about it, it's foreshadowing of the cleanliness of his kingdom, beginning with Messiah himself, who has no spot or blemish. Does that make sense? So yeah, I do think it correlates.
Yeah, yeah. Because, like, to me, like him saying, I've literally, my table's ready. I've done my part. Like, I came and I did that. Maybe I'm not reading this in order, but like I did my part. Like, I came, I showed you how to live a rightful life, how to follow and love, the Most High above all, and like how to love thy neighbor. And
Yeah.
so, to me, like getting the table ready, it's kind of like this is like what he did, like
Like
his
his righteous
works.
acts, like setting out like the righteousness in front, like,
Correct,
yeah.
correct.
And it also connects, if you think about it, we're preparing the holy city for us, which is the New Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
Like that heavenly country, like we have read in the book of Hebrews, that the author references of, Abraham and all the patriarchs just seeking to find that city which has no walls. I don't know. I think it connects with everything, honestly. It's just, word is so precious. But yeah, so speaking about the king being furious and setting out his armies, again, this resonates a lot. Daniel chapter 9, verse, where is it? Verse 26. And after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come, excuse me, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with a flood. Until the end of the war, desolations are determined. So we see a prophecy of this in the book of Daniel. So it resonates a lot with this parable that Messiah is referencing right here. We also see for verse 8 where it says, then he said to his servants, the wedding is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. And that connects me being not worthy is also the same as you rejecting him, right? So connecting with verse 8, we have Matthew 10:11. Now, whatever city or town you enter, inquire who in it is worthy and stay there till you go out. And again, if you guys don't remember, Matthew 10 was when he sent his disciples two by two, obviously to do the works of the kingdom, to evangelize. But notice how he's already giving them a command to inquire who in it is worthy. So they can go and stay with them, if not for them to go out. So very foreshadowing of the wedding supper itself. We also have for verse 10. where it says, so those servants went out in the highways and gathered together all whom they found, both bad and good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. And again, we know that these guests, it's the Gentiles who were invited because of the people, the Jews, rejecting him. And we see connecting with verse 10, Matthew 13:38, and I put 47 through 48 as well. The field is the world. And again, this is Matthew 13 speaking about the parable of the wheat and the tare, I believe. Yeah. So the field is the world, the good seeds are the sons of the kingdom, but the tares are the sons of the wicked one. Verse 47, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet that was cast into the sea and gathered some of every kind, which when it was full, they drew to shore. And they sat down and gathered the good into vessels, but threw the bad away. So connects beautifully with verse 10. We also see Acts chapter 28, verse 28, and this is when Paul was evangelizing the Gentiles. Therefore, let it be known to you that the salvation of the Most High has been sent to the Gentiles, and they will hear it. So we see a connection of that being why the guests were invited from the highways. Verse 11, we have a few connections with this one. But when the king came in to see the guests, he saw a man there who did not have on a wedding garment. And again, we know that this wedding garment represents righteousness, right? So that's what it means. This person was full of sin. This person had not repented. This person had not let go of his old ways. This person was very, very, very much attached to his flesh and the things of this world. That's what that means. And we see it throughout scriptures. We see it in 2 Corinthians 5:3. If indeed having been clothed, we shall not be found naked. And being clothed, meaning with the wedding garments, right? And we know that nakedness is a representation throughout scriptures of sin. We also see it in Ephesians 4:24, and that you put on the new man, which was created according to the Most High in true righteousness and holiness. So that one is straightforward. Colossians 3:10 through 12, and have put on the new man who is renewed in knowledge according to the image of him who created him, where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcised nor uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave nor free, but Messiah is all and in all. Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, etc., etc. I cut it off there. But basically, all the fruits of the Spirit is what represents his righteousness or the wedding garments. We also see in Revelation, we have 3 from Revelation here. Revelation 3, verse 4, you have a few names, even in Sardis, who have not defiled their garments. And they shall walk with me in white, for they are worthy. Oh, that's beautiful. And this is when he's writing to the churches, by the way. This one specifically is the church of Sardis. And he's specifically pointing out that the defiled garments are those that are in sin. So he's saying basically there's a few names. In other words, there's a chosen few among you that have not defiled basically their righteousness, right? And they shall walk with me in white, for they are worthy. In white, meaning in the garments. Yes, the wedding garments.
I could be off, but like I think of the verse that says like, this is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. And I feel like I was so pleased when we live in righteousness.
Absolutely.
Obviously he was being the
shine.
Messiah, but
Yes.
I
Oh yeah, but he
yeah.
is well pleased with us if we strive to be like Messiah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
We also see Revelation 16:15. Behold, I am coming as a thief. Blessed is he who watches and keeps his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. So again, you see it throughout scriptures, even in the Old Testament, in the Torah, when it's speaking of nakedness, it's speaking of shame, of sinful nature, right? So again, blessed is he who watches. In other words, you are watching and praying. You're not falling asleep. You have your menorah, your lampstand filled with oil, and you are keeping on your garments, right? You're walking, in other words, in righteousness. And again, we also see it in Revelations 19:8. We had already read it, but and to her it was granted to be arrayed in fine linen, clean and bright, for the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. And in case you have doubts, it tells you straightforward what it represents. In case you're saying like, oh, she's just making up these meanings. No, it's there, guys, throughout scriptures. So for verse 12, so he said to him, friend, how did you come in here without a wedding garment? And he was speechless. We have Romans chapter 3, verse 19. Now we know that whatever the law says, it says to, okay, I'm going to read that again. Now we know that whatever the law says, the Torah, it says to those who are under the law that every mouth may be stopped and all the world may become guilty before the Most High. In other words, his Torah is what judges whether you are righteous or not. So people want to say the law is done away with, then how is he going to judge you without a law?
Yeah, makes
It just makes no sense, even in the natural. In the court system, you need a law in place in order to judge and convict someone as guilty or not guilty. And we know that we will be all standing at the day of judgment. What will he be judging? Again, it is under the law that he judges. We have, and again, what is he judging? Going back to verse 12, whether you have a garment or not. It's so beautiful. Whether you have righteousness on you or not. Did you come here without a garment? That's basically what took place in verse 12. You can enter, right? So that's why I put Romans
That's your ticket.
with that. That's your ticket to make it into the wedding supper. Absolutely. Now, verse 13, I have a few connections, including Enoch. So we have, then the king said to the servants, bind him hand and foot, take him away and cast him into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And we know Messiah speaks about this a lot when talking about those who don't make it to the wedding supper, but instead make it to hell. Because again, they did not repent. We did a study once and we quoted literally verbatim how many times he says that. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Like over and over and over and over in his words, he repeats this, right? So we have Matthew 8, verse 12. Today, I'm just going to connect a few. But the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew 25:30. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. Again, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Luke 13:28. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth when you see Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all the prophets in the kingdom of the Most High and yourselves thrust out. Ouch. That is my prayer, that we are actually grafted in, not thrust out, right? Or cut off, in other words. And again, we have connecting with verse 14, for many are called, but few are chosen. Oh, but wait, before I go to that one, I do have Enoch chapter 10, verse 4 for verse 13. With the bind him hand and foot and take him away. We know in Enoch, it makes reference exactly of this, speaking of Azazel, which is the goat. And I can go deep with that with the goat. The goat represents Baphomet, right? So it's not someone good. So please do not call people goat. I know people say, oh, it means greatest of all time. No, goat is not a good thing. Goat is not a good thing. So we have, wait, chapter 10. Yes, this is chapter 10 in Roman letters. I mean, numbers. So we have chapter 10 of the book of Enoch, verses 6 through, no, verse 4. It's actually verse 4. I highlighted the wrong things here. Wait, is it verse 4 or did I put this wrong here? Chapter 10, I think it's 6 too. You know what? This is not 10. This is another chapter. This is for something else. Hold on. I'm going to read this later, but I have not the right order here. This is chapter 10. Oh my goodness, I need to go back to school. Acts is 10. Okay, so it is 10 verse 4. And again, the Adon said to Raphael, which is one of the angels, by the way, bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into the darkness and make an opening in the desert, which is Dudael, and cast him therein. So you see the casting of Azazel. I don't know if you guys have done the study with me about the Day of Atonement, which is one of the appointed times, the feast days. This is what that literally represents. We see it also in the book of Leviticus, that they were to let go of the goat. One of the goats, they were to let him cast him out into the darkness and to bind him hand and foot. So again, this connects with verse 13. Bind him hand and foot, take him away, and cast him into outer darkness. And Azazel representing the Satan, I guess, the major one, because there's many Satans. And again, verse 14, for many are called, but few are chosen. We have Matthew 20, verse 16. So the last will be first, and the first last. For many are called, but few are chosen. So, in other words, it doesn't matter at what point in your walk you come, as long as you walk and you come, that's what matters, right? Everyone is called. But the difference is, will you answer to the calling? That's the difference. All right, so now I'm going to read the next portion, which is the Pharisees asking Messiah about the taxes. So, verse 15, when the Pharisees went out and plotted how they might entangle him in his talk, again, this is a continuation. He's speaking of this parable and these people. He's speaking of something literally about them, by the way, about where they're going to end up in, right? He's speaking about them. And while he's saying all these things, look what they're planning. Then the Pharisees went and plotted how they might entangle him in his talk. So you could see the wickedness in their hearts. Like there was no inch of righteousness there.
There's a verse in the Bible says like to not devise evil against your neighbor, no?
Yeah, but they clearly they were not following scriptures. They were following traditions of men. That's what they were following. Verse 16, and they sent to him their disciples with the Herodians, meaning the Pharisees' disciples, saying, Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God in truth, nor do you care about anyone, for you do not regard the person of men. So right there, look at the sarcasm that they're using. And I believe they're even using this teacher, rabbi, as sarcasm, to be honest. I don't even feel like they have that matter of respect towards him. And look how they continue asking him. Tell us, therefore, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But Yasha perceived their wickedness. So you see it right there, what I was saying, and said, why do you test me, you hypocrites? Ooh! Anyway, I get excited. Show me the tax money. So they brought him a denarius. And he said to them, whose image and inscription is this? And they said to him, Caesar's. And he said to them, render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to the Most High the things that are God's. When they had heard these words, they marveled and left him and went their way. So again, they were trying to be extra clever, I guess, in their own minds, and trying to catch him. Entangle him is what it says exactly on verse 15, right? I'm going to show you a few slides I have on this, just so you see what they were exactly trying to do. So is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar is the question, right? So this is not referring to the law of Moses. I want to point that out because paying taxes to Caesar is nowhere in Torah. This is another nation, the Romans, which are completely pagan. Nothing at all to do with Torah. But this is referring to a Jewish law tradition. So again, a tradition of men. The Pharisees declared it a sin to pay tax to Rome because to them, it was like, we are not supposed to pay outsiders, right? We have to keep the law of Moses. So they made up their own tradition. That's how they were trying to entangle Messiah. It was not anything at all breaking Torah. Obviously, if it would have been breaking Torah, Messiah wouldn't have broken it point blank. So the Caesar was considered divine, meaning Caesar, the empire, right? The Roman Empire. The Jews saw the coin as having a graven image because of the fact that the coin had Caesar on it, right? So Yasha's statement is a kind of proverb. That's how he answers him, again with wisdom. Some see paying taxes a matter of religious faith. So Yasha makes the matter trivial and unimportant. Messiah never criticizes the Roman government. And I want to speak on that because we are right now in a very obviously Gentile world, ruled by a non-believing whatsoever, quite the opposite government. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat. Yes, that's to me, that's like those who decided not to follow him. I guess that was before, that was said before. Nina, I just saw your question. Well, I'll explain. I'll gladly explain a little bit more afterwards, okay? So let's continue. So we have, okay, so we have government in place here. So I put a few scriptures here. Romans 13, verse 8, owe no one to anything except to love each other, for the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. So we're gonna go through a few of these just so you could see. And I actually wrote out verses 1 through 3 here as well. But the whole chapter 13, verses 1 through 8 has to do with government. And according to Paul's words, but I believe they are true. So again, we are to obey, according to scriptures, we are to obey whomever rules and taxes us. When there is conflict, give to the government what belongs to the government. However, on God-ordained moral issues, believers must never back down. So in other words, like if gay marriage, for example, if we know that that contradicts scriptures, we're not to go and celebrate it. You know what I mean? Like we're not to like, oh, okay, I'm gonna marry you because it's the government said so. No, that's a point where you have to bring scriptures first, like the word before government. But yet we can approach moral sinners with Abba's love, and I did incorporate that here, with Yasha as our example and not hate them. So it's not a matter of hating them, but setting the, and we've met people, we've discipled people that deal with this kind of sin. And, it's not a matter of rejecting them at all. But are we going to go and encourage this type of marriage when we know it's clearly not biblical? Absolutely not. Now, submitting to government, what does that mean? The Most High allows preferences, but demands obedience on moral matters. In other words, we live in this world, we are governed. Literally, it says it like that in the word. We're governed by darkness and principalities, right? The rulers of this world, literally. However, we can't go and just say like, oh, flip this. I don't want to like say anything bad, but you know what I mean? Like I'm not gonna do anything the government told me to do when it comes to something like following traffic lights, right? Or obviously there's certain things that it's like, no, that's dumb. Like, when it came to like 2020, certain things that were imposed, there's a part where you use his Holy Spirit to guide you, but doesn't mean you're gonna go up to the government and say like, be this and that, and I'm not gonna submit. No, we are actually called to be vessels of light and showing that we are vessels of his glory, like showing the posture that we have, even how we treat those in authority. And look what Romans 13, 1 through 3 says. Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from the Most High. And the authorities that exist are appointed by him. And I say this, yes, even the bad ones. He allows, like the book of Habakkuk says, he allows those to be empowered to be there for a reason, for his perfect plan to come to pass. But it does not mean that he is okay with what they're doing. It's just he allows them to be. It's like, for example, in the book of Exodus, Pharaoh was Pharaoh. The Most High allowed him to be Pharaoh. You get what I'm trying to say? So therefore, whoever resists authority resists the ordinances of the Most High, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. In other words, follow your authorities and you're going to be okay. You're not going to get incarcerated, right? So this is the next portion. So let's do some connecting precepts for here now. So we have for verse 15. Actually, I'm not going to. So verse 15 is basically just stating where else it's this parable is quoted in, which is in Mark. It actually tells you right here, Mark 12, 13 through 17, if you want to put it for your notes, and Luke 20, 20 through 26. And I believe, I did put them here, but I believe there's no major differences. Let me see if it was this one. There was one that I saw. No, they're pretty much the same. There's one later that I saw like a little bit that I wanted to point out, but not here. So let's move on to verse 16. So verse 16, where it says, and they sent to him their disciples with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of the Most High in truth, nor do you care about anyone, for you do not regard the person of men. Which, by the way, that's not true. We have Mark 3:6. Then the Pharisees went out and immediately plotted with the Herodians against him. Okay, that's the account another account that says that. Mark 8:15. Then he charged them, saying, Take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. And I add this one here because that's literally what these Pharisees were doing. They were filled with leaven. And we know that leaven is spiritual, representing sin and the ordinances of men. Mark 12:13, then they sent to him some of the Pharisees and the Herodians to catch him in his words. So here are just like a few accounts where we see the Pharisees as well as the Herodians plotting against him over and over and over again. Now, verse 21. They said to him, Caesar's. And he said to them, Render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to the Most High the things that are the Most High's. We have Matthew 17:25, which we read recently. He said yes, and when he had come into the house, Yasha anticipated him, saying, What do you think, Simon? For whom do the kings of the earth take customs or taxes? From their sons or from strangers? And I think I meant to put more in this part, but this is the part where it's talking about taxes. I don't know if it was Yasmin who taught it
I
or
taught him.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you want to add a little bit to that? Or?
I think I was like when I taught my memory, but when I taught on that part, I just remember saying that like basically like there's gonna be laws in this earth, and I feel like God, like Elohim is an Elohim of order.
Exactly.
So something I was also thinking about was how there was like a word that I had that basically like we're here to live kind of like a peaceful life, but also I even feel like also to others it could also be an example, because if you're all over the place and you're getting traffic tickets or you're getting taken to court for things that, or you're for doing things that you should have done, then that looks also bad on your part, and we're supposed to also like be a good representation. So I feel like Abba left us this, and Messiah spoke about this because he wanted us to have order in our life.
Absolutely. And also, the things of this world is like, it doesn't really matter to him. Like money is money, money comes and goes.
Yeah.
So to him, it's like, just pay to Caesar what is Caesar's.
Yeah.
You know, like at the end of the day, that's not what I don't even care about that, you know? As long as you don't disobey him, right? That's what matters. And we see a little bit more. I am actually going to read the whole thing here, Romans 13, 1-7. I know I read till 3, but just so you see the full context of it, because it ties in beautifully with everything of this portion. It says, let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by him. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of the Most High, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have a praise from the same. For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is God's minister and avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. So in other words, like, if you're breaking the law in this life that the governing authorities have delegated, like what are you doing? You know what I mean? You're not even being a vessel of glory to him. Verse 5, therefore you must be subject, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this, you also pay taxes, for they are the Most High's ministers, attending continually to this very thing. Render therefore to all their due, taxes to whom taxes are due, customs to whom customs, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. So it's crazy because I've heard a lot, believe it or not, a lot of believers saying like, oh, it doesn't really matter if we steal from the government. Like they'll say things like that, you know, because the government is crooked or whatever. And that is so wrong, because at the end of the day, that's actually a sin. You're not having integrity, number one, and stealing is a sin. And I understand that, how do I say this? Like, I understand the crookedness part, But that's not up to us to judge. Like the Most High is gonna judge them separately. Like they have what's theirs coming. Our duty is just to do what we are asked to do. Point blank. That's where I stand, and that's, because I've heard it so many times, like even things like lie in your, like income taxes and things like that, or like, or do this, do that. Like I honestly don't see that as something righteous. Yes, Jess?
Oh, I just wanted to share how I always like go back to how the word says like that we ought to walk just like Messiah walked. Like if we like claim to represent him, and it's like, would he do that? Like would he like lie or steal or any of that stuff, you know?
It's so true. Yeah, like that the famous bracelets WWJD.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it always goes back to that. Like, what would he do? Would he do that? And we clearly see he wouldn't, because he clearly states in his word, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, right? So true. Yes, Silvana. Yes, you become as evil as them. Absolutely. Yes, yes. So we also have 1 Peter 2:13. Therefore, submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Adon's sake, whether to the king as supreme. And this is Peter speaking, one of obviously Messiah's personal disciples. 1 Corinthians 3:23, and you are Messiah's, and Messiah is of the Most High. So, and what does that mean? That if we are his, we are to follow his footsteps. Come on. This is what Silvana was saying. 1 Corinthians 6:19 and 20. Or do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from the Most High, and you are not of your own? For you were bought at a price. Therefore, glorify the Most High in your body and in your spirit, which are the Most High's. 1 Corinthians 12:27. Now you are the body of Mashiach and members individually. So in other words, we belong to him. What are we trying to do by trying to do crookedness and just like shady stuff, right? So we have verse 23. Oh no, that's the next portion. So we're moving rather quickly. So let's continue. All right, so now I'm gonna read. This is the same account continues. Verse 23. The same day the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to him and asked him. And again, this is the same day. So we see that it had like a break, I guess, in between everything that was happening before with the parable, and then with them trying to get him with the whole question about Caesar and da da da. But we see that within the context, in the same day, these people, the Sadducees, which we know that the Pharisees were different than the Sadducees. The Sadducees were the ones who did not believe in the resurrection. Just wanted to add that there. So they came to him and asked him, saying, Teacher, Moses said that if a man dies having no children, his brother shall marry his wife and raise up offspring for his brother. Now there were with us 7 brothers. The first died after he had married, and having no offspring, led his wife to his brother. Likewise, the second also, and the third, even to the 7th. Last of all the women died also. Therefore, in the resurrection, whose wife of the 7 will she be? For they all had her. Yasha answered and said to them, you are mistaken, not knowing the scriptures nor the power of the Most High. For in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels of Elohim in heaven. But concerning the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was spoken to you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob? The Most High is not the God of the dead, but of the living. And when the multitudes heard this, they were astonished at his teaching. Once again, these people try to get him with one of their silly questions, trying to like out wisdom him, right? When they're speaking to wisdom himself. So I'm gonna just show you the Canva first and then the connecting precepts. So we have the resurrection, the topic on the resurrection, which is the afterlife, basically is what they mean by that. So this is the key verse for here is verse 30, where it says, for in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels of the Most High in heaven. I'm going to break this down. I'm going to attempt to break this down to you. So number 1, the Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection, so they were insincere. That's the first part. they didn't even believe in it. And I don't even understand what they were trying to get Messiah in if they're not even believing in it. Number two, the Jews didn't have a definite doctrine about afterlife. So in other words, they weren't sure what would happen when you would die. They weren't really sure. And number three, the question tied the law of marrying a brother's widow to the resurrection, which we're going to see that it's found in the book of either Deuteronomy or Leviticus or both. I have it here for later, but we're going to go precept upon precept. I do have Enoch chapter 15, verses 6 and 7 here, which I had, that's the one that I had initially highlighted. This one says, but you were formerly spiritual, living in the eternal life and immortal for all generations of the world. And therefore I have not appointed wives for you, for the spiritual ones of the heaven. In heaven is their dwelling. So in the resurrection, in other words, mankind will no longer marry. Instead, they will be like heavenly beings, meaning like angels, right? Who do not engage in marriage. We see exactly what happens when the angels try to do the opposite, right? The angels were created as eternal spiritual beings, and marriage was never appointed for them. However, we know that the watchers, which are the fallen angels, right? They sinned by stepping outside of their heavenly purpose and taking on human wives. And we find this in Genesis 6, as well as throughout the book of Enoch. So we know that this is something that the angels actually did, and that's how the Nephilim came about and the whole 9 yards. However, we know that their initial intent was for them not to marry. And let me show you this right now. So I want to show you key parallels between Matthew 22, verse 30 and Enoch 15, 6 through 7. Why? Because I believe wholeheartedly that Messiah was straight out quoting from Enoch in this passage. Why? When he says, you do not know scriptures, for in it you find, etc., etc. That is the only part of scriptures that is mentioned in. Outside the canon and in the canon, only in Enoch. And Messiah specifically saying, you do not know scriptures. In other words, you don't understand the scriptures. And he's verbatim, if you see it, making reference to what's found within the book of Enoch, which is why I personally believe Enoch is scriptures. So the first thing we see is marriage in heaven. In Matthew 22:30, humans will not marry in resurrection. And in Enoch 15, 6 through 7, angels were never meant to marry, right? The nature of angels. In Matthew, we see that angels do not marry. In Enoch, we see angels are spiritual and immortal. By the way, that's where they grab the whole vampire concept from. I always say Hollywood is not that creative. They get it from the scriptures. They know what's up. And the fallen angels are basically the vampires. Just wanted to point that out. So we have human transformation. In Matthew, resurrected humans will be like angels. So in other words, this is what our afterlife is going to look like when we go to the wedding supper of the Lamb, when we go into the New Jerusalem, right? We're going to be Alahims, meaning mighty ones, like the angels.
There's some truth to those movies, then.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. They know.
That's
And then
crazy.
in Enoch, it implies angels are outside human roles. So in other words, we know that like in this humanity, we're very limited with, and I forgot to add the scripture, but in the book of Psalms 80 something, 89, I think it is. I don't want to misquote it, but somewhere in Psalms it talks about like we are gods, but in this world ye shall die as men.
Yeah.
So in other words, we were created as angels. Gods, what the word God means is mighty one, which is why I don't like calling the Most High just God, by the way, because all the angels are gods. We even have the gods of this world, right? We even have how when he gave the commandment in the book of Exodus saying, do not have other gods before me, because all fallen angels, including Satan, they are gods, right? So we were created as gods. That was our original intent. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were gods. In other words, they were like the angels, but created to the image of Messiah, which is different, right? There is a specific design given to Adam and Eve. Now, when the angels sinned, beginning with Eve, and then with the rest of the women, right? They now create mixed seed, which I don't want to get too deep into that. But that's what we're talking about, the roles outside of being an angel. So in other words, it's almost like when he comes back for gathering the saints for the wedding supper of the Lamb, he's going to do a reversal of what took place in the Garden of Eden. So we came from being gods, right? Meaning Elohims, meaning angels, to being in this fallen state, in this fallen world, becoming, to call it mankind, humanity, right? In the wedding supper of the Lamb, we will be glorified from our flesh and reversed back to the original intent, which is to be like angels. Does that make sense? So that's what I mean by that. We also see the judgment for crossing lines. So in Matthew 22, we see the implied by the Sadducees trap, by the way. And in Enoch, we see the explicit watchers judged for marriage. Because it's clear there that they're judged for that. As a matter of fact, that is the whole point why they even went to Enoch to intercede on their behalf for what they had done. But that's another study on its own, completely separate from this. Okay, so he is the bridegroom and we are his bride. So why does it say that in heaven there won't be marriage? Meaning, like, when you become angels, there won't be any more marriage. The purpose of marriage in this life is so that we can reproduce his seed, so that we can reproduce, the like kind produces like kind, right? That is the whole purpose of marriage here on earth. In eternity, we're married to him. And that's why I put he is the bridegroom and we are his bride. The whole metaphor comes from that. That's why it says on earth as it is in heaven, right? So the kingdom, remember how chapter 22 began? The kingdom of heaven can be, and then he begins talking about the parable of the king that sends the son to get his bride. It's the same concept, okay? So what did Messiah mean by the statement about the patriarchs? The part where he says, like, the God of, here, it's right here, Matthew 19. No, that's not it. Did I put it here? Oh, here, Matthew 22:32. I know I put it somewhere. I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. So again, I am. So I was equals not God of the dead, right? So I am, which is what Haya means, by the way, the God of the living. This can only be in the context of afterlife and not of the resurrection, because the resurrection hasn't happened yet. So what he's speaking of, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, is speaking about the God of the living, right? Meaning you are living unto eternity, because we know that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are moving on into eternity, for they are literally in covenant with him, in an eternal, perpetual covenant with him. So the fall of man brought death, and therefore reproduction was necessary, like I said, to repopulate. The original purpose of marriage was procreation and a family to raise the children. After the resurrection, when we are immortal, what use is there for marriage? There's no use whatsoever for marriage once we are immortal. And I quoted here from Matthew 19, verse 8, where it says, Yahshua replied, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because of your hardness of heart, but it was not this way from the beginning. In other words, from the very beginning, this was not the intention. The intention was for you to be with one wife and reproduce with one wife here in this fallen nature, in this fallen world. In the very beginning, the original design was for you to become one with the Father, and that was the marriage. What do you think it's called? The marriage supper of the Lamb. It's literally a marriage.
Back to the Garden of Eden.
Back to the Garden of Eden, absolutely. Yes, Silvana, yes. In Genesis, he commanded them to fill the earth. That was after, was that actually no. In the Garden of Eden, he had also commanded to multiply, didn't he? Or was that after the fall? I will have to go back now. I don't remember.
No, it was right when he made Eve.
Yeah.
And he was done. That he said, now go and multiply. Like it was before she sinned.
Yes. Yes, I remember now. And I remember when we did the study on Genesis. I remember when we did the study of Genesis that we concluded, again, this is just us, I don't know if you guys remember, we had concluded that the way of multiplication, though, was very different than the way we're multiplying now.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what Hasatan had corrupted in them later. The tree of knowledge of good.
I mean, he literally commands them, fill the earth.
Yeah.
Like, I made you this paradise, fill it now.
But remember that the earth that he was commanding them to multiply in was not this fallen nature.
Mm.
Oh, let me see. Jessica said, you know what's something I do wonder, like if the angels were not created to procreate, then how did they have seed to mate with women, if that makes sense? That's a good question. But they were literally coming out of their role, which is why they were condemned for. And actually will go to the lake of fire for that, for what they did. It's literally in scriptures. It's in the book of Jude. It's in the book of Enoch. It's in so many books. So we do see that even though they had a seed, it wasn't the intent. Does that make sense? Yeah, see, Sylvia, I don't know about if we're gonna be able to know who's who. I want to say I think we would because we have his spirit. Um, sorry, I'm just reading the comments. I'm going
I'm just
backwards.
saying, because if they're so worried about, like, I mean, if you do make it, you're giving a new identity. So who's wife?
Well, I think you're given a new name, but I don't think it's a new. I think you'll know who you will. I think so. Again, I don't know because I'm not there yet. But I kind of think like we'll know at least not the ones maybe that stayed behind, but the ones that make it. I think we'll be able to know who's who.
Mm.
I don't know. I don't know. So many questions we have for him, right? When we see him face to face, like, it's like, can you please explain to me with clarity?
This is
Right?
where not all who wander are lost comes into play.
Yeah.
We're here
But
wondering.
yeah. But again, this has to do with eternity. Like this has to do once we make it, once we are there. Um, all I know is what Messiah is answering here, which I'm gonna connect a couple precepts now to it. Maybe hopefully it brings some more clarity. But we do see that the intent is not to procreate. And we're gonna see, for example, where it says, let me see what verses I have here, verse 23. Let me see what I have for verse 23. The same day the Sadducees who say there is no resurrection came to him and asked him. I'm just going to confirm that the Sadducees did not believe in resurrection. By the way, you can find the same thing on Mark 12, 18 through 27 and Luke 20, 27 through 40. I'm not going to read it. Let me see if this is the one. Oh, wait, actually in Luke, we see a little detail here that I want to read. I knew there was one that had a little bit of a detail. Verse 36, I'm going to start from there. It says, nor can they die anymore, for they are equal to the angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. But even Moses showed in the burning bush passage that the dead are raised when he called the Adon the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. For he is not the God of the dead, but of the living. For all live to him. Then some of the scribes answer, okay. So I just wanted to add that here because Messiah here in Luke points out what Messiah gave a little bit more detail. If you notice, he's answering where it says that, if you know the scriptures, you would know that there's neither marry or given in marriage, right? Those who are counted worthy to attain that age and the resurrection from the dead, neither marry nor given, right? So it says, nor can they die anymore, for they are equal to the angels. And then it says, but even Moses showed in the burning bush passage that the dead are raised when he called the Adon the God of Abraham, which brings more clarity there with that part where he quotes the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. I just wanted to point that out in Luke. We also see Acts 23:8, where it says, again, confirming that the Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection and no angel or spirit. But that the Pharisees do confess both, so they believe in both. Okay, so let's get to the nitty-gritty now. So verse 24, where it says, teacher, Moses said that if a man dies having no children, his brother shall marry his wife and raise up offspring for his brother. And this is directly from Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 5. So that is in the Torah. It says, if brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall go into her, take her as his wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And we've already discussed this a lot, but we know that this was to preserve the seed of the brother who passed away. And we see that with Judah, from the 12 tribes. We see that Judah had the 3 sons, that the 2 sons died for spilling the seed, etc., etc. And Tamar, which was the wife of the first son, was given to the second brother, and the second brother still didn't give her a seed. They both end up dying, and then he was saving her for the last brother to basically preserve the seed of the brother. But we know how that story ended. But anyhow, we're not going to get into that, but that is the gist of it. That basically the brother was supposed to perform the duty of the husband if the brother had died and passed away. And there is depth into this that stems back to what took place in Garden of Eden. But again, this is another study completely on its own. But this is, I just wanted to point that back because this is where the Sadducees are getting this from, you know? Then we see on verse 29, I'm going to skip to verse 29, where it says, Yasha answered and said to them, you are mistaken, not knowing the scriptures nor the power of the Elohim. And this you are mistaken, not knowing the scriptures. We know that is when he's quoting from Enoch. So I just wanted to point that out. We already read from Enoch, so I'm not going to read it again. So verse 30, where it says, for in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels of Elohim in heaven. And I know we read from Enoch, but I also do want to read from 1 John. It's actually 1 John, and it says John here. I might have mistyped it. Yeah. Let me, actually, no, it's right here. It's right here. 1 John 3:2. Beloved, now we are children of the Most High, and it has not yet been revealed that what we shall be. But we know that when he is revealed, meaning Messiah, we shall be like him. We see that? For we shall see him as he is. In other words, we know Messiah is an angel, an Elohim, a mighty one, right? In other words, a God. He is a God. And it says we shall, it says we shall be like him.
Mm.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to share something in regards to what you were saying, how like that they didn't know the scriptures, and it's kind of crazy because Proverbs tells us in Proverbs 25:2, it is the glory of the Most High to conceal matter, but it's the glory of kings to search out a matter. And it just goes to show like they never were like truly his disciples.
They didn't recognize him. They didn't really understand the words. They might have repeat the words verbatim, like in the Torah and in the prophets, but they weren't living it out. They weren't doing the Shema,
And
right?
there's a scripture that
Which-
says deep calls onto deep. So it's like those mysteries they couldn't know because they weren't really seeking him in spirit and in truth.
And if you think about it, the Sadducees didn't even believe in the afterlife.
Yeah.
So they didn't really understand who he was.
And that's denying scripture.
Absolutely. So we have for verse 32, I am the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob. The Most High is not the God of the dead, but of the living. So connecting with that one, we have a few. We have Genesis 17:7. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you and their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and your descendants after you. And this is the covenant, the very first covenant with Abraham. Genesis 26:24, and the Most High appeared to him in the same night and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. This is for Isaac now. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bless you and multiply your descendants for my servant Abraham's sake. Genesis 28:21, so that I came back to my father's house in peace. Then the Adon shall be my Elohim. Exodus 3, verse 6, moreover, and this is the part with Moses, when he's with the burning bush. Yeah, this is verse 6, and then verse 15. Moreover, he said, I am the Elohim of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon the Most High. Verse 15, or I want to say here the Adon, because that was Messiah. Verse 15, moreover, the Adon said to Moses, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, the Most High, your Elohim of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. So you see the difference. The Father sending the Son to Moses, right? This is my name forever, and this is my memorial to all generations. And we know that the name is I am, which is in Hebrew, Haya or Ahaya. Mark 12:26, but concerning the dead that they rise, have you not read in the book of Moses in the burning bush passage how the Most High spoke to him saying, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and we read that already. It's also in Luke 20:37. Acts 7:32, when Stephen is recounting the same story to these same Pharisees that were killing him, literally stoning him to death, saying, I am the Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob. And Moses trembled and dared not to look. So he's just recounting the story and confirming the scriptures. Again, Hebrews, I'm going to mention Hebrews again, 11:16. I know we always bring it up. But now they desire a better, that is a heavenly country. Therefore, the Most High is not ashamed to be called their Elohim, for he has prepared a city for them. And we know that this is speaking about the New Jerusalem. And this is a covenant that he did literally with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which has to do clear as day with the afterlife that we are to partake in, which is why Messiah again set quotes from that to literally show them in their faces, like, what do you mean? Like, the covenant is to take you on to eternity. There is an afterlife. He is the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the covenant was like that he will bless your generations and your descendants forever. It doesn't mean only in this world. It means moving on to eternity, moving on to the New Jerusalem. Because we know that the patriarchs, they were not even looking for a earthly country. They were looking for a heavenly country, which had no walls. So beautiful.
They had
We-
eyes to see.
Yes. So we also have for verse 33, before we move to the very last portion, which is very short. And when the multitudes heard this, they were astonished as at his teaching. And we see that often, Matthew 7:28. And so it was when Yahshua had ended these sayings, right after the Sermon on the Mount, this was, that the people were astonished at his teaching. And we see it over and over and over. So let's move on to this. Actually, we have two little small portions, but they're quick. So verse 34. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. Then one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him and saying, Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? Yasha said to him, You shall love the Adon, your Elohim. You shall love the Most High, your Elohim, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. It's funny how they were constantly just trying to catch him. Like, they're always plotting and saying, let me see how I can get him. And he would just answer everything correct because he is the walking
That
Torah.
happens to us today.
Yeah,
Can you imagine? He was like, ¿con qué me van a saltar esto ahora?
I know, right? Like it was like literally they wouldn't give him no chill, like no break. He had no chill. They had no chill for him. So we see again a lawyer questions Messiah, and again, in Greek, this word lawyer is nomikos, which means an expert in the law. So it doesn't literally mean like a lawyer like we know today. It's literally someone who was very knowledgeable in the Torah, you know? So it wasn't a Roman law lawyer, but a Torah expert, in other words. I put it here just to bring clarity. Because a lot of people would think they were like lawyers, like under the Roman law. No, these were people who knew the Torah, right? That's what, whenever you see a lawyer, that's what that means. So Mark 12, verse 31. Oh, I meant to put like little quotation marks there. So, and the second one is like, namely this. Okay. What is this talking about? So this command quotes from Leviticus 19:18, which I have it up here. You shall take, which by the way, I like to always point to it because a lot of people think that those two commandments Messiah gave were New Testament commandments, and they were not. He was literally quoting from the Torah itself. And we find it, the first one, we find it in Leviticus 19:18. You shall not take vengeance nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Adon. So again, both commands are about relationships. The great command sets the foundation for the second. And what is the great command? To love the Father, right? Our relationship with the Most High is greater than any human relationship. Calling both commands great doesn't mean they are the same. One still comes before, right? Or first. All the law and prophets depend on these two commandments. It destroys any notion that the law and prophets is not for believers. So again, it goes back to the concept of many people thinking the law is done away with, or that they were just Old Testament commandments. We clearly see that all of the law hangs on those two. So I always like to put it in that way, that the greatest two are like the umbrella that embarks everything else. If you are keeping commandments without loving the Father and loving your neighbor, that means you're just following a set of rules. Because in order to do any commandment, even keeping the Sabbath, even eating clean, taking care of your temples, whatever it is that you're doing, if you're not doing it because you love him, then you're doing it in vain and you're just a Pharisee. And I always like to say that, which is what these people literally were doing. Okay, that's the only slide I have for that. Let's do some connecting precepts really quick. So for verse, this one starts at 34. So this chapter, you see the same story in Mark 12:28 through 34 and Luke 10:25 through 28 if you want to read later for more context. But we have for verse 35 where it says, then one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him and saying, so again, we know that this lawyer here is a person knowledgeable on the Torah. Again, knowledgeable by head knowledge, but not by heart, clearly not understanding the Messiah is the walking Torah. So we have connecting with that. Luke 7, verse 30, but the Pharisees and lawyers rejected the will of the Most High for themselves, not having been baptized by him. So we see that these people the lawyers were the same as these Pharisees. They did not accept Messiah. Luke 10:25, and behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tested him, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? Again, it was always these lawyers that were like standing together with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, as well as in Luke 11:45 through 46 and 52. Then one of the lawyers answered and said to him, Teacher, by saying these things, you reproach us also. And he said, woe to you also, lawyers, for you load men with burdens hard to bear, and you yourselves do not touch the burdens with one of your fingers. Woe to you, lawyers, for you have taken away the key of knowledge. You did not enter in yourselves, and those who were entering you hindered. Oof. In other words, like, you don't do what you preach. And even what you're preaching, you're hindering others from entering. So clear as day how he would rebuke. I mean, Luke 14, verse 3, and Yasha answering spoke to the lawyers and Pharisees, saying, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? Titus 3:13, and this is just to show a lawyer later walking in righteousness, sends Zenas, the lawyer, and Apollos on their journey with haste, that they may lack nothing. And this is a letter that Paul is writing to Titus. But I just wanted to point out that not all lawyers ended up being bad. We do see a lawyer being mentioned by Paul, whom apparently was doing the work of the ministry. So some did convert later on. That's what I get from that. So we have where am I here? Verse 37. Yasha said to him, you shall love the Adon, your Elohim, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And again, that's from Deuteronomy 6, verse 5, you shall love the Adon, your Elohim, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. He was verbatim quoting Torah here, as well as in Deuteronomy 10:12. And now, Israel, what does the Adon, your God, require of you? But to fear the Most High, your Elohim, to walk in all his ways, and to love him, to serve the Most High, your Elohim, with all your heart and with all your soul. Deuteronomy 30, verse 6, and the Adon, your Elohim, will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants, to love the Adon, your Elohim, with all your heart and with all your soul, that you may live. And then we had already read Leviticus 19:18, which is the one that talks about loving your neighbor as yourself. Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm not skipping anything here. So yeah, Matthew 19:19 also speaks about loving your neighbor as yourself. Mark 12:31, again, speaking about loving your neighbor as yourself. And then he says, there is no other commandment greater than these, meaning the first and the second, right? Luke 10:27, you shall love the Adon again with all your heart and loving your neighbor as yourself. Romans, and this one's good. Romans 13, verse 9, for the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet. And if there is any other commandment, are all summed up in this saying, namely, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Galatians 5:14, for all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. James 2, verse 8, if you really fulfill the royal law according to the scripture, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, you do well. Because clearly we know that in order to even love, doing anything that has to do with his commandments, you can't do it without loving him and loving your neighbor. It all gets summed up with that. Matthew 7, verse 12, therefore, whatever you want men to do, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. It's literally everywhere. Romans 13:10, love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. First Timothy 1:5, which, by the way, I just realized the other time I said Titus and I think I meant Timothy. I was correcting myself. So 1 Timothy 1:5, now the purpose of the commandment is love from a pure heart, from a good conscience, and from sincere faith. And that's it for that portion. Pretty quick. And lastly, you guys have any questions till now? I think it's pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah. I love that part.
All right, so lastly, we have this short portion here. So while the Pharisees were gathered together, they were still together. The whole time they were still together, by the way. Yasha asked them, saying, what do you think about the Messiah? Whose son is he? They said to him, the son of David. He said to them, then how does David in the spirit call him Lord, saying, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool. If David calls him Lord, how is he his son? And no one was able to answer him a word, nor from that day on, did anyone dare question him anymore. So it's funny because they try to get him so many times, and he was just like throwing fire back at them. And then he asks them one simple question, and they're like, no. So yeah, no wisdom there. So let me just go to the last slides. Okay, so this is quoting from, just giving you a heads up, this is quoting from Psalms 110. So who was David speaking to? Because David, and I put this here in Hebrew, by the way, and I circled this word here, which is literally Haya in Hebrew. And why am I showing this? Because in our English Bibles, in our translated Bibles into English, Spanish, or whatever other language, this is what we're going to get. We're going to see the Lord said unto my Lord. We see Lord in uppercase, and then we see my Lord in lowercase, right? The Lord said unto my Lord, sit thou at my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool. So when you look into the Strong's Concordance in the Hebrew, you see a difference with the Lord and the other Lord. Literally one of them, which is this one, is Haya. You see it?
Mhm.
You guys see it? So it's literally telling you the Father said to the Son. So it's not like they group it in Lord, Lord, which takes away so much. So whose son is the Messiah? Which is the question that he's asking the Pharisees and the Sadducees, right? On verse 41. So like I told you guys, the Hebrew substituted, basically in all the translations, they have substituted, from what I've heard, because they have a taboo saying that they cannot say or write his name, right? So according to that, in their scriptures, they've substituted like his name, right? And they'll put just like, I don't know what they put, but I know in our translations, which is a Christian translation or Catholic or whatever, they substitute wherever it says Haya to Lord. Okay. So obviously this brings confusion, which the Pharisees themselves were confused. So, but how can David call his descendant Lord? And that's the question. Let me move this out of the way so I can see this. Okay, so David writing, we know that in Psalms 110, David is writing prophetically under the Most High's inspiration about Messiah. We know it's a prophetic psalm about Messiah, not literally about himself, but about Messiah. So no Hebrew father would ever refer to his own son as his Lord. When the Pharisees answered David, they were only half right. And you can read 2 Samuel 7, 8 through 16, by the way, which is the same prophetic psalm, scripture as Psalm 110. But I did put some parts here, like I put verse 8 and verse 9 that we're going to read together. So Yasha did not imply that he was the Messiah, by the way. He was just asking them, who's the Messiah? Because clearly they could not perceive, so he wasn't even implying it. Like they're not gonna get it, you know? He was just trying to like, all right, that's cool. Let me ask you a question. So I put here, yeah, let me test you. So I put here Hebrews 1:13, which correlates beautifully. To which of the angels has he ever said, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool? And that has been quoted from, again, 2 Samuel and Psalms 110. Psalms 110, verse 1, a Psalm of David. Again, the Adon said to my Adon, the Lord said to my Lord. And this should read, the Father said to my Lord, which is the Son, right? The Father said to Messiah. That's how really the translation should say. Haya said to my Lord. And whose Lord? David's Lord, like David's Adon, right?
Yeah.
Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. And we know that Messiah is the one that's been asked by the Father to sit at his right hand. So I'm just going to read 2 verses from 2 Samuel chapter 7. So verse 8. Now therefore, thus shall you say to my servant David, thus says the Most High of Hosts, I took you from the sheepfold, from following the sheep, to be ruler over my people, over Israel. And I have been with you wherever you have gone, and have cut off all your enemies from before you, and have made you a great name, like the name of the great men who are on the earth. And again, this is just up to verse 9. But if you read the entirety of 2 Samuel 7, 8 through 16, you're going to see how prophetic it is about Messiah himself being represented with, before we go there though, being represented in the Son. David being represented in the Son. So I'm trying to like share and it's not opening. Come on, there you go. Let's just have a few more and we're done. A few more connections with this last part. So we have for verse 40, 41, sorry. Well, not 42. So for verse 42, where it says, saying, what do you think about the Messiah? Whose son is he? They said to him, the son of David. So we have, and actually, yeah, I think those are Matthew 1, verse 1. Okay, yeah. Matthew 1, verse 1, the book of the genealogy of Yahshua HaMashiach, the son of David, son of Abraham. I wanted to point that out, that he is from the genealogy of David. Matthew 21, verse 9, when the multitudes who went before and those who followed cried out, saying, Hosanna, the son of David, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Adon, Hosanna in the highest. For verse 42, what do you think? Wait, no. 44. The Adon, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool. So we have here, again, we are not going to read it again, but Psalms 110, verse 1. We have Matthew 26, 64. Yahshua said to him, it is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Mark 16, verse 19. So then, after the Adon had spoken to them, he was received up into heaven and sat down at the right hand of the Father. Woo! Acts 2:34, for David did not ascend into heavens, but he says himself, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand. So very clear. We also see 1 Corinthians 15:25, for he must reign till he has put all enemies under his feet, Hebrews 1:13. But to which of the angels? We already read that one. Hebrews 10:13, from that time waiting till his enemies are made his footstool. And then last connection is verse 46, where it says, and no one was able to answer him a word, nor from that day on did anyone dare to question him anymore. Luke 14:6, and they could not answer him regarding these things. Mark 12:34, now when Yasha saw that he had answered wisely, he said to him, you are not far from the kingdom of the Most High. But after that, no one dared to question him. And we had already studied that. We know that this was when he had questioned one of the, was this the rich, not the rich ruler? This was someone else, but basically the point I'm trying to make here is that how no one would dare to question him whenever he would give his answers to people. So Luke 20 verse 40, but after they dare not to question him anymore. So
Wanted to
yeah.
say one thing. Sorry.
no.
I was thinking of kind of how like Messiah would always respond to them exactly with scripture, fighting back with the word, because the word is the sword of the spirit. I mean, he is the word. But I was also thinking about how when he was in the desert with the devil,
Mhm.
and like how literally he fought back with the word and he won that battle, and he would always kind of like win like the conversation because he was fighting back with the word in a
Absolutely.
meek way though. Like he wasn't trying to have like a conflict or like a big debate. He would just throw the word, and at the end of the day it's the sword of the spirit, so it's gonna cut through. That's what I was just thinking about.
I mean, it's a double-edged sword, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cuts deep. So I wanted to sum up this teaching tonight with this. Many are called, but few are chosen. We see that in Second Ezra. So I need this
Sorry.
in Second Ezra, verse 8, chapter 8, verse 3. Another book from Apocrypha, where we see Ezra's, the Most High speaking through Ezra, saying the same. There be many created, but few shall be saved. And we know another translation renders this as this world was made for many, but it will be left for few. Basically, because it all goes back to the invitation to the wedding and how many are going to answer to that calling. So having said that, I pray that you receive the invitation today and that you do not turn it down, but instead you get excited and you go shopping for the righteous garments, for the white linen garments, that you put them on the same way or more. You get excited when you're going to a big event, that you think of this as a lifetime, literally a lifetime, eternity event, just to be ready for our bridegroom. So having said that, I hope to see you guys next week again. We're about to basically finish this study in Matthew soon, so don't miss any chapter. This is getting juicier by the minute. May Abba bless all of you and have a great rest of your evening or day if you're watching later on. Shalom. This is freezing up.
I think because you grabbed the
Oh my goodness gracious.
I think yeah.
Yeah.